Thank you much for that very kind introduction. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, alumni, board members, all the other members of the Monmouth community. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Picture yourself, try to imagine what is the average place on planet Earth. Where does your mind go? That is, if you take into account all the mountains, all the oceans, the entire surface of planet Earth, imagine where would you be and what would it feel like? What would you see if you were in that place? If you do the math, you would actually find yourself more than 7,000 feet underwater in pitch black darkness, freezing cold. That's the average place on our planet. Yet we don't think of it that way because we live on land. And yet the oceans are 71% of this planet and guide more than anything else our life on it, which is why it is important and why centers like the Urban Coastal Institute are essential to understanding that dynamic between land and sea. So very briefly, I'm going to try and cover the immense area that was introduced for things to talk about, but that's what motivated me. I'm from Texas. I didn't grow up near the ocean. But what really blew me away was just the simple scale of the ocean as I came to know it as I served in the U.S. Navy. And it is so vast, and 3/4 of the ocean is still completely unmapped and unexplored. More than half of planet Earth remains completely unexplored. We have complete maps of Mars, the moon. We even now have decent imagery of Pluto, but we do not have complete maps of our own planet. Why is that? The ocean's hard. It's really hard. It's opaque, it's very deep, and it is not conducive to cheap exploration like the land is from space. That's what attracted me to it, was the technical challenge. Unlike Dr. Mayer and many of the people here, I am not a scientist. I'm a venture capitalist and a technologist. I like to build things and pilot them. And that was what attracted me to the ocean, was how could we make it more accessible so we could actually explore it. So I'm a tool builder, and I saw later in life, in the last 10 years or so, that there was a great opportunity to apply resources and technology to make the ocean more accessible so we could understand it better. It may be controversial to say so, but I believe that many of the climate models that have been introduced that are guiding worldwide policy and potential energy transition, they're not that accurate. The mass public is not going to believe in climate models until they're more accurate and more predictive. That won't happen until we have more data and a better understanding of how the entire climate works, including the 71% that is made up by the ocean. And most of that exploration and data that we've extrapolated for how the ocean behaves comes from the shallow 1,000 meter level. Why? Because it's so hard to explore below that. So that has been a big motivation in my life, is how can we make the ultra deep ocean more accessible so we can get more data to refine our climate models, to understand the evolution of species down there, so we can just contribute to knowledge for knowledge's sake and hopefully have some beneficial results. Which leads kind of into the second question that was asked, which was, what specific actions can we take in order to explore the ocean better and prioritize? It's unfortunate that now we're seeing significant cuts in funding, which you could argue one way or another whether that's necessary or not, or whether it's properly prioritized. But the issue is there needs to be greater public-private partnerships to explore the ocean. We can't do everything on $100 or $200 million ocean research vessels crewed by government agencies that have cost structures that are 2 or 3 times more expensive than private sector. There is no way the U.S. government could have designed, built, and explored the deepest point in all 5 of the world's oceans like my private venture did in the 4 years it took us, at the cost that it took. We need to learn from each other, and therefore I think there needs to be more initiative for private sector to be given prioritize and then hopefully be able to prosecute those priorities in a much cheaper and much more rapid manner than the government can. Government can't do anything, but in partnership with private enterprise, you can do extraordinary things like build the Panama Canal or go to space. We need something similar for the ocean exploration. Other things that are big priorities that I've seen in my explorations is we need to confront what I have seen is one of the biggest problems we face, which is plastics in the ocean. In every single deep ocean trench I visited, and I've been to 17 of them, we found microplastics in every single one of them. They're now entering the food chain. They are in your bodies right now. They're in your bones, not in great massive quantities, but it's increasing, and that's well documented. So there has to be, related to ocean science and engineering, we need to apply more resources to find a way to replace plastics that end up in the ocean. As soon as they end up in the ocean, they're done. You're not going to get them out, and they enter the food chain, and it's awful. So we need biodegradable, ideally beneficial components to replace the immense amount of plastics that are going into the ocean. And then finally, I'd like to mention what are some of the specific things we can do to help government, private enterprise, et cetera, explore the ocean and help us understand it more. One thing we can do to lead as the United States in ocean research is not to do what we're currently doing and not to get political, but the fact that they have now opened up potential permitting to mine the seafloor in contravenance of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, which 160 plus nations have signed, where that is regulated by the International Seabed Authority, an agency of the United Nations. And the US has never signed UNCLOS, and it is now authorizing basically strip mining the international seabed for what are deemed critical metals. One can argue whether that's beneficial or not. I'm personally against it for economic and other reasons. But the issue is for the United States to basically say, we're going to do whatever we want, and we're going to ignore the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, is not great leadership. There should be more interaction with the rest of the world, and we should be trying to help preserve and constructively work with other countries in order to extract its resources in an environmentally responsible way, if it's even necessary, which I personally don't believe that it is. Another thing that should be done is that I've been known to say that the greatest barrier to deep ocean exploration, in fact, ocean exploration in general, you're not going to believe it. It's not technology. It's not personnel, passionate people that are interested in exploring the ocean. It's not even money. The number one, and you're going to love this, the number one barrier to accelerated exploration of the ocean is government permitting. Not just in the US, but all over the world. There is a requirement for even years of application, resubmission, data after data to get approval from mid-level bureaucracies throughout the world. There must be a bias towards permission granted, especially for accredited researchers from accredited universities and organizations. There must be a bias to say, yes, we want to go look and explore this area. We shouldn't have to wait a year or 2 years for a permit to do that. It is the biggest barrier. And it's completely inconsistent, not just among countries, but within US government agencies. In my own view, there should be time limits set on any permit, that it should be automatically granted unless there is specific reasons why it should not be granted, particularly in the United States. That would massively accelerate research and development and provide predictability for these incredibly expensive research vessels and teams that are conducting the explorations. I'm sure Larry is completely familiar with this situation where you literally have ships waiting for permits at $30,000 to $50,000 a day, or having them even canceled and having to completely rejigger research priorities. It's a big problem, and bureaucracy, unfortunately, is a big area of that. And then finally, I think the one thing that the government can do, particularly in the United States, is simply to assign priorities. One thing in the private sector, many private philanthropic organizations are often asking, what should we be doing? We have all this money, we even have some good research vessels. What are the top 10 priorities of NOAA or the federal government at large that we can do in the ocean? That would help direct us of saying, oh, that obviously is extremely important. We will focus our resources on that outside of the government process because we can move faster and quicker than they can. That list doesn't exist. I hammered NOAA for years. What are the top 10 even mapping priorities of the United States? I never got one. What are the top 10 research areas that we should be focused on as a country? Still don't have it, not to my knowledge. The moonshot was quite clear. President Kennedy said, we're going to the moon, we're going to land people on it. Great, that's focus. The ocean research community, in my own view, is all over the place. There needs to, I know the scientists are all going to disagree, but it does help to have very concentrated, focused attention on a small number of priorities and knock them down, and then we can get new ones. That actually is something that provides traction with the average individual that supports ocean funding in their elections and with government officials. So to prioritize even just a couple of things would help the community in general, because it's constantly lambasted that we get less than 1% of what is spent on space research for ocean research. And I think part of that problem is that we are in so many different avenues of research that we can't focus properly to provide that backing. So those are the comments I have, and I thank you all very much for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to the panel.